Welcome to the Diamond Hands podcast, where medicine meets momentum and branding becomes a leadership system. I'm Leslie Tracy Craditchville, co-founder of Diamond Hands Media. I build aesthetic brands that lead, with a background in employee benefits and business finance, so brand becomes authority and asset value. This is mindset, money, and marketing for founders building brands that run without them. Because brand isn't a logo, it's how you lead.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Diamond Hands podcast. I know it's been a minute, y'all. However, today we are so excited to have Brandon Mullen, RN. He is the founder of APMG, which stands for Aesthetic Practice Management Group. Yes. And so basically, his company actually works with practice managers all throughout the US in order to help them get their teams, get their practice owner, get that business in order. Because many times, you guys, as you know, especially if you are in practice, you might not be the greatest manager. So he helps your managers to learn how to manage and to lead that practice the way they should. And he's also the practice manager at Ayana Atelier. Yes. And so he's actually really helped them to increase their numbers year over year. So he knows what he's doing. So when he started APMG, I was like, this is so natural.
Thank you. I mean, I like to think it's a good transition because I always say there's no MBA, there's no school to become a practice manager. So I don't tout that I have a school, but we try to share our experience and our knowledge with each other so that we can help each other grow and get actionable feedback that we can implement into our practices right after the call.
And I love that. And so, just tell us a little bit about your journey because guys, I met Brandon it was like 4 years ago now.
Yeah, almost 4 years. It feels so much longer, but yeah, no, it was Aesthetic Next was the first aesthetic conference that I went to.
Yeah.
And I remember that you were on stage doing your presentation and the room was like a little quiet. And I just wanted to kind of be your hype man because it was like, I don't know, I get uncomfortable when it's like so silent. Like even in my office, I have terrible ADHD. I have music playing all the time. So like this was a little odd, but I wanted to like get the crowd going and you had such a great energy on stage. So I was like, I was that guy. And, of course, whatever came out of your mouth was very inspiring. And for that being my first conference, I was just so impressed by how you articulated your content and how relevant it was. So I thank you for inspiring me to do a lot of changes in the way that I manage my practice and help other practice managers.
Oh, I love that. Oh, thank you. Yeah, he was my hype man. He made me feel so good. I was like, oh my goodness, I love him. Cause it's like, guys, I financial planning is where I started and we're talking about like death and dying and business succession and all that. People tend to just get scared and then it's like, bye, So Brandon was like, let me put some lightness in the room. Like, it was great.
Yeah, sometimes it's like not the sexiest topic depending on the time of the day. So, people are afraid, like, I don't want to think about what I'm going to do when I exit aesthetics. And you're like, well, you better damn well think about something.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
it was awesome.
Funny. One of the women that was in the audience there, she actually hired me. She sold her practice a year and a half later for like 13 million. I was like, yeah, nothing to do with me. But in any case, so practice management. So tell us about your journey too, from, working in the hospital setting and then becoming a practice manager. And what was it like that first year? And tell us about some of your deepest lessons that you learned, when you started doing that.
Absolutely. So I had a little bit of a gap between bedside and aesthetic practice management. So I was an ICU nurse, and then I went to case management and worked for a software company and did sales, and I was an account exec. So I really like to point that out because that really helped me to hone in my communication skills and kind of leadership and organizational skills being in that more business-like arena. And that's not very typical for bedside nurses, but it was actually right around COVID, right before COVID, I got that job and then kind of bridged over into COVID. And that really was the pinnacle of that era of my career. but it really helped me to pivot. It taught me how to work virtually, which is what I do now with my fractional practice management of Iona Atelier. And it really helped me to kind of just, communicate in a better way and help make sure that clients' needs were met. So that really translated into a lot of the things that I currently do to grow things like our memberships, to make sure that people are delighted with the services and the products that we offer. It helps me find inspiration for some of the offerings and sales. We're coming into Q4 right now and thinking of all of those opportunities to make sure that people are happy. That's some of the things that I kind of pulled from that executive leadership role into practice management. So when Ashley opened up in January of 2021, she was grateful enough to have a following to go with her from her previous work experiences, but she cultivated her own environment with Iona Atelier. But after 3 months, she was booked and busy 3 months out. She was losing her mind. She was losing leads. She couldn't answer the phone. And, she asked me to be her practice manager. And I said, I have no idea what the hell I'm doing, but I'll figure it out. And I still live in Pittsburgh, and I commuted to Alexandria, Virginia every other week to do stuff on site. And then I kind of leveraged processes and streamlined operations so that I could do a lot of things virtually. And the first thing I always say is the phone. The phone drove me insane because it would just keep ringing and ringing and ringing. And she didn't have a good system to do that. So did a little research, found something that could, port our numbers to cell phones, and we could text and do a couple other things. So, that's kind of the trial by fire that I underwent that first year. And it really helped me to grow because I kind of learn by mistakes too. So if something doesn't work, give it a good try. And then if not, we'll try something else. But that first conference, Aesthetic Next, really helped me to find a community of people because I wasn't sure like who to call. It's not like practice managers, even today, they're really not like widely socialized. They should be on, the webpage, and our title should be consistent. But, back then I didn't have any resources to go to. And being a bedside nurse, I always had like a community to kind of follow. So I kind of started to dive into the conference world, started listening to podcasts, things like that to help me learn. And slowly but surely that kind of led to speaking opportunities for myself that I inserted myself into. Everyone's like, how do you get these speaking roles? I'm like, I ask, I just put it out into the universe. But that kind of started that trail into giving me the confidence to speak on stage. And then after that, I started talking specifically with one practice manager in the West Coast after Med Spa Show 2023. And that one conversation led to more regular conversations, led to, hey, let me formalize this as a business because obviously the need is there. And that's kind of like how APMG organically formed, was just by one conversation that kept continuing to happen.
I love that. I mean, how many times do you experience that? Like, it's like even like, in the work that I do, sometimes people think they can just like call me and pick my brain. I'm like, no. I'm like, but you need to pay. I'm like, and so it's such a good thing that you realize the value that you bring because, how many people would actually just take advantage of that and continuing to ask you questions and continuing to asking questions and you're giving them your time. However, you're not seeing the value back to yourself, right? So that's such an amazing thing that you had that confidence in yourself to take that next step to say, I'm going to start a business out of this so I can give value back and not be burned out.
Absolutely. I mean, when I first started, I didn't, I'm understanding as the years continue that time is the one thing I can't reproduce. I can't get more of, I can't buy it. Everything else is, tangible, but my time is very valuable. And just like I kind of preach to my owner at Injectors, like your time is so valuable, so is mine. And exactly what you said was happening. People would pick my brain, and I was basically doing business consulting for free. And I have terrible imposter syndrome. I'm like, oh, what do I possibly have to offer? I don't have anything good to say, blah, blah. And, I started to make a membership because I think it made the most sense. So APMG, we meet virtually twice a month on Mondays for an hour. The time that goes into that prep, follow up after, doing research, it's a lot of time. So I started out at like $50 a month for the membership. And it honestly took the feedback from others like, oh, you're way too cheap. Why aren't you charging more? And I'm like, but I'm not out to make $1 million. And, truly I'm not, but I also need to be fair to myself.
Yes.
So, as it's kind of scaled, I am slowly increasing it, but and I don't ever intend to get too crazy because I need to make sure that, like I preach about making services and packages for patients, I need to make sure that other practice managers are getting that value too. And if I'm just increasing prices of my membership and not adding value, then I'm just being greedy, and that's not my case. So, it's organically developing into more of a value add as time goes on.
Yeah, and that's amazing because any of you guys out here who are business owners and maybe you want a fractional practice manager like Brandon has done with a Mayana Atelier, someone that's not on site all the time, but they can give you resources, they can help manage your people on the inside, what have you, because that's maybe something that that you may need. Another thing I wanted to ask you about too, Brandon, is also, you talk about like membership programs, and I know that membership programs are a thorn in a lot of practices' side because they don't know how to manage them. They don't know how to find the proper cheerleader for it. They don't know how to put in the proper accountability tools. So tell me a little bit more about how you work with your practice managers to ensure that when they put new membership programs into practice, that is something that, first of all, brings in, that recurring revenue. Number two is a value add for the patients. And number three is not too much of a headache for the team that actually has to talk about it. Just tell us a little bit more about that process.
So I think, and it's funny that you asked this because I'm trying to get a different tier of our current membership at Iona right now. And it really does take a lot of thought. It's not like this isn't like a build the plane while you're flying it kind of thing. Like there's so many considerations. So number one is finding the technology that can help you manage it. Because if your current EHR or CRM doesn't support memberships, it's a total pain in the butt. There's some functionality of the one that we use that I wish we had, but you really have to analyze how can this streamline my process so that it's not so much manual work, because that manual work usually comes back to me. So I always want to work smarter and not harder. And whenever I implement something, I just want to see like what's the functionality. If I'm going to discount services, can I bulk modify that if I want to change it? How does it affect the ability to ship? Do you have an online store? Are there exclusions that you want to include? Do they need to use things within a certain amount of time? How are you tracking the services that they utilize, and can your EHR or CRM support it? All of those things, just from like a logistic standpoint, need to occur first. And then you have to figure out what people actually want. So, I feel like there always has to be like a hook. So, what's going to draw them in? Is it a free quarterly skincare treatment? Is it a free add-on service to something that they're already getting? You really have to take a look at your current services and evaluate, what's going to be that buy-in? What's going to elicit them to want that membership? Is it, purely discount? Is it something for free that they get after a certain amount of time? Do they have minimum membership requirements that make financial sense for you? Also, you have to consider the fees. Not a lot of people think about, well, how much is that card on file going to cost me every month? Because I'm not really bringing in $200 a month from that membership. It's going to be less because of those fees. So thinking about all of those things is a lot, but I think taking time with them and polling your patients. It's amazing how many practices don't just send out a Google form like, what do you want? Ask them what they want. They're not going to be shy. I just did it now because for the holidays, we're ready to like hold up that sign that's like, I'm out of ideas. Like, tell me what you want, because there you remember that whole thing. It was like, just make an appointment. I'm tired of doing social media.
Yes,
It's like
yes.
part of the day. Like we do a 12 daily deal thing. It's a lot. It is so much on the back end, and I'm starting to do it now. So just ask them what they want. Do they want filler? Do they want tox? Do they want discounts on product? Just
Mhm,
ask
mhm.
them and make it make sense. I always like to be the black hat thinker. So I like anything that we do, any package, membership, whatever, I always work it backwards. And I think if I'm going to be that consumer that buys this, how much am I spending in a year? What am I going to get? What's the minimum that I need to get as far as products or services that make it fruitful for me? because we're also not out to like scam people, right? We want it to be a value add. Um, One interesting sidebar is I forget for what conference or why I was aggregating this data, but I looked at our highest spend customers and what that was compared to our total revenue within the first 3 years of business. And there was, I think, 120 VIP members in our membership were accountable for 37% of our total revenue increase.
Honey.
Total revenue. So those people that spend will continue to spend if you treat them correctly. 100%.
Wow. And I think you make a really good point there. The people, your VIPs, that they will continue to spend or invest, whatever we want to call the word, if you continue to treat them well. And we talk about this many times. It's just like, so many times practices are looking outside of their business to find new patients, when it's just like, if you treat your people even better, guess what? You're going to increase the average ticket, because they're like, oh my goodness, I want to do, I don't know if you guys have this, but they'll be like, oh, I want to do a silpherm, or I want to do an RF microneedle, whatever it is. They're going to want to do extra things because they're like, I've gotten really good results. They treat me really well. And so I want to get even better results and see what else they have to offer. Um, yeah, so I really love how you guys look at the data, because it's like you have to have data driven things in your practice. Otherwise, you're just shooting from the hip.
Mhm.
So speaking of data, like, what, as a practice manager, what type of reports are you running? What type of data are you looking at? If you were to name three or maybe two, say the two top reports that you run that are imperative, what would those be and why?
I would say I do look at revenue per hour every month, and I'm actually in the throes of doing that now, between our injectors, because I always preach that your hand shouldn't be doing anything that's less than that number. So whenever they want to do something else that's like, I want to go clean the windows. And I'm like, no, no, you're not. You don't need to do that. Like, you need to be doing things that generate more money, because I especially look at that too when it comes to other things that they want to do, like training, things that don't necessarily bring in that same amount per hour, but it's their personal and professional goal to maybe do teaching or shadow days or things like that. So I want to make sure that the math is mathing whenever we start to veer away from other things besides just, your typical like practice treatments. So just to kind of keep everything in perspective. And, I always love to see how many hours they work per month versus how many the revenue per hour, because usually when they work less, they make more. So, looking at scheduling, see if we need to change some things. We have technically 3 locations. So seeing what does better where. So I do look at product and service utilization trends. That's probably my number two between the locations, because our business model likes to keep pricing the same. So we need to make sure that if we do one thing in one area, that it's going to be supported in the other. So, those are probably my top two reports that I love to look at least monthly. And well, you didn't ask. So number three is what I'd like to see is the free VIP services. So part of our membership is a free quarterly skincare treatment.
Yeah.
And the reason why I'm looking for a new membership is because I have to cap it, because those free hours are adding up to 16 days a quarter of 8-hour days of treatment. So we need to either kind of reformat how we do some of the benefits of that membership, or just think of something different that might surprise and delight in a different way.
That's amazing. Two things that I think are really good, like a universal topics that you just talked about: revenue per hour, and then product utilization. I love those because it's like, revenue per hour. And then if you look at how much it costs to run your business per hour, sometimes I don't think people that are not practice management oriented, they don't understand that there's a correlation between the two. So if you have a practitioner who they're doing way less than what it costs to run the practice per hour, and they were becoming a liability on your balance sheet. Tell me more about what you do and what is your improvement plan for practitioners who are not bringing in what's needed to substantiate what their hourly rate, maybe plus their commission, plus whatever. Like, what do you do in those situations when someone's revenue per hour is just not cutting it?
So there's a couple things I can do. One recent example was we have one service that is bookable online by patients, but it's a free service and it's to use like an LED light. And I looked at my one provider schedule and realizing there's all these appointments all over her calendar blocking viable time that she could get new clients or, a service that's going to generate some revenue. And I had to reach out to those people that were booking it that way because initially when we implemented that in one location, it wasn't a problem because we manually entered it. So I had to disable that functionality because it was just like making her schedule Swiss cheese, making it impossible for somebody to book. So it's little things like that that sometimes you need to revisit some process that you thought was fine or maybe fine in one location but doesn't work for another. Another thing that I try to do is make sure that we can layer appointments appropriately. So when someone's doing microneedling, for an example, there's 20 minutes that you could do a recurring talks in that same time. So sometimes there's a little bit of manual work trying to fit the schedule, having somebody come in a little bit earlier or later, whatever the case may be, to kind of make the most of that, we'll call it 60-minute block so that she's not just sitting there for 20, 30 minutes chatting, but and that's not always a bad thing. They're allowed to get breaks and chat and talk about the membership, but to make the most of the time, she could have another patient in there while that patient's numbing. So I always look for opportunities to streamline and try to make the schedule make sense. And now we're starting to get a couple more providers in our spaces, so it helps to have other people there. So as we have those available hands, then I can kind of schedule a little bit more strategically.
Yeah, and that makes sense. And, and then also when as a practice manager, like how do you continue to build your bench as they call? How do you continue to ensure that you always have a good stream of qualified candidates to come in just in case something's not working out with an underperforming practitioner or what have you? How do you kind of make sure that your brand is bringing in and attracting, viable um not contestants, viable practitioners.
That is a great point. So I will say we're definitely people first, and we only have four other nurse practitioners in addition to myself. Actually, I'm sorry, three and one bachelor prepared nurse. So we're not scaling to just keep adding providers on. Our space is very limited and we're maxed out. We actually just did a renovation where we added a room in the summer. But just trying to make the most of what we can do and maximize like the patient flow is really my goal and challenge to see where like we're literally in 1150 square feet in our biggest location with the most providers. So having three people and me is really like a patient flow challenge, but it's one that I welcome. We always have, I always say like you always recruit just in case because you never know. I think people are being a little bit more bold these days. It's not even like the cold call emails with resumes. People are coming in just off the street and handing me paper. I'm alarmed that the paper still has typos, spacing errors, capitalization. A for effort. I had a very lovely person come in a couple weeks ago and they were sweating. And I was like, wow, that hustle and grit. And then I looked at the paper and I was like,
Mm,
like you can't even capitalize. Like, I mean, chat GPT, that shit
right?
you know,
2024 people.
but, I think that Ashley does a great job of always, she goes by gut feel. She meets so many people. Everything she does with her aesthetic multiplier conference, all of the networking things, we do a lot of training and shadowing. So we always kind of have people like on our radar, like subconsciously that we have seen usually in practice that make an impact and an impression upon us.
Yeah, and I think that's so great because you guys have created mechanisms because of the leadership of Ashley and you in the aesthetic community to be like, okay, you always have kind of your feelers out because, I think at any moment's notice, whether you're a practice manager listening or you are a business owner who doesn't have a practice manager, or maybe you do listening, you should always build your bench. Same thing in sports, which I'm not a sport head at all, but like same thing in I'm like, ew. But like, same thing in sports. It's just like, you have the other able-bodied players sitting on the bench just in case that star player you have gets an injury or can't be there or whatever. So then you can, it's not going to be as expensive to recruit because you have a couple people who they want to work with you, but there's just no opportunity for it yet. So I think that's always a good thing to have your feelers out there and have people that you could call upon if necessary. So you're not down and out.
Absolutely.
Definitely. And then, some of the last things I want to talk to you about too is like, leading a team. So practice management, it's very important to lead a team. It's very important to kind of uphold a certain culture so that people are thinking in a group think way cohesively so the practice runs and goes forward in a certain direction. So tell me about some of the mechanisms that you put in place for team leadership. Is that monthly meetings, weekly huddles? What do you go over in those meetings? Like, just tell us a little bit more about that process and why it's important.
So I will say I'm very fortunate because we are very tight knit. We are very close and small. So we communicate daily via just a group chat with updates. We use a lot of technology to kind of keep everyone in sync. Asana for task management is my Bible in my life because like I can't with sticky notes. I can't with like just Word docs. Like I need tasks assigned to me. And I always tell them, like, if it's not in Asana, it's not on my radar because I have a litany of things to do every single day. So I always look at Asana. But I meet with our nurse practitioners like informally every week. And then we have usually a virtual team meeting because to get all of us in one place at one time is damn near impossible anymore. So we do a lot of Zooms and, we just kind of use that as our forum to go over like a checklist of items that we need to chat about, any updates, and do like a roundtable of concerns and address it that way. We really try to keep SOPs at forefront so that everyone's doing the same thing in the same way. Obviously, technology changes, so there's a lot of updates with that, but I'm proud to say that I'm working on forming our first, I'll call it our corporate retreat this January. We have some downtime. So I'm really looking forward to that to kind of like let your hair down, relax for a little bit. But then I'm going to put on like my dorky practice manager hat and try to, do some, bonding exercises and, go over goals for 2025 and really kind of formalize it in that way, but still kind of mix the fun with the seriousness and intent of the whole trip.
I love that. I love that. So you have the formal meeting that happens. You go over SOPs. You talk about any concerns, and that's really important because I do know some practices will be like, "Oh my God, we're too busy to have these monthly meetings, or we're too busy." And it's like, yeah, you're too busy, and then people are gonna be too busy and walking out the door, or people are gonna be too busy and patients walk out the door because you're missing out on opportunities to either celebrate people that are doing well or bring up concerns that need to be brought up in a global, forum. So. I think it's so great that you guys have both formal and informal meetings to kind of keep everyone on the same page.
Yeah, and I mean, I hear in APMG, I hear so many different variations because some people have like a staff of 20. I know Rebecca Maccabee of who's Julie Bass Kaplan's practice manager. She does this cute thing called Biscuits with Becca, and they have like that's their morning meeting, but she does that like once a month. I'm like, that is so cute. I'm like, can I do like bagels with Brandon or something? Because
Why not?
like, maybe I should have him bring me some food.
Yeah, make it fun. I think that's so great. And the last question I have for you is like, so what resources, so APMG, tell us about again how often you meet, what resources they're going to find on your website, what does a practice manager need to do to get to that next level, and what resources can you give them? And then number two, if a business owner does not have a practice manager or a practice manager who's doing too many other things, so they really can't practice manage, what would you recommend to them?
Ooh, two great questions. Okay, so APMG, I don it as a virtual mastermind group. We meet twice a month on Mondays at 3 p.m. Eastern because that tends to be most people's admin days. So we have that. I do give out a list of resources, so things that have helped me along the way, including podcasts, books, all the conferences that have like a business component that might be specific for us. But then I do kind of put just all of them in case there's like clinical and business needs to make big bang for the buck. And also, I recently did a virtual conference for practice managers through APMG called the APMG Assembly. I figured virtual because then you don't have to worry about a flight. You can do this in the comfort of your own home, in your office, drinking wine, whatever. It's recorded, and I just kind of bring in some KOLs. It was really well received, so we're going to do another one in February of 25. But we have all of those resources at APMG, and we also have APMG Aesthetic Allies. So I started to do some recordings with vendors in the space that might be beneficial to your practice. Maybe not something that you need now, but maybe something later. So I have HR consultants, I have legal, accounting, like every kind of discipline in a little archived video library so that you can access it at any point in time as a member. So those are some of the benefits, and always open to additional suggestions. And so if you have a practice manager or you need one, I would say if you don't have one, to advertise, promote, look for someone as a personal assistant first. Because if you can trust somebody to do your personal tasks, you can trust them to get into the nitty gritty with your business. So I've had a lot of people that have started out as like babysitters, but if you don't have kids, dog walker, whatever, just have them do some personal tasks for you, see how they take direction, take them out for a meal on the interview and see like how they order, do they just like mull around the menu forever looking lost, or they direct and know what they want? You can really look for some attributes, through something like that experience. But it's really looking for those qualities in a person. Are they organized? Do they have a little bit of ADHD? If you found a gay, that's 5 extra bonus points. There's a litany of things, but there has to be some organization, some project management. I mean, we all wear such different hats that it's hard to quantify. But if you look for some basic foundational qualities, you can mold and make a practice manager out of a lot of different disciplines. Don't always look for somebody specifically that has experience in healthcare or med spas. That would be my best advice, and people have had a lot of success that have actually followed it.
Wow. And just to follow up on that, I do think it's excellent advice, because I do think what happens to sometimes people come in and they overtitle. And so they overtitle someone, they're not ready for all that responsibility yet. And then they just have like a sense of what they think should be happening. They have this sense of what they think they should be paid or what have you, but they don't even have the skills yet to actually be an asset in 100% way to that business owner. So I love that we were saying like bring someone in as a personal assistant, or if you're bringing them into the business right away, maybe they're an executive assistant or what have you, and that's how they start. And then they can grow into that title of a practice manager, because there's a lot of responsibility and a lot of trust that goes into that position. And I think that's really great.
100%. Yeah. I mean, and I think it weeds out the people that are specifically looking. I know that our industry, our profession has been kind of inundated with, people that are self-seeking for other motives. And I think that when you advertise for that, you kind of look for a broader audience, and you cast that net just a little bit wider.
Yeah, I love that. Oh my goodness. So guys, everything about Brandon is going to be linked in the show notes. So definitely you need a Brandon. You're not going to be able to get this one. But
Absolutely.
it's like
For trademark. Now, everybody needs a Brandon, but you can't have mine. That's what Ashley always agreed.
you need to change right that. But yeah, guys, we're going to put everything about Brandon in the show notes. So if you are a practice manager, this is a write-off for the business owner. Have your leader, the business owner, actually invest into APMG. If you are a business owner and you want to have a practice manager, this is also a place. Even if you don't have a practice manager yet, then maybe you could find some resources about how to manage things until maybe you find one, because it's always good to know enough to be dangerous, even though eventually you don't want to do everything. So Brandon, thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. I love this.
Of course. All right. Till next time, guys.
Bye.
Bye.
Want more clarity like this? Join the Branded Practice newsletter community. I write about strategy, systems, and brand leadership straight to your inbox. Go to diamondhandsmedia.com to sign up. And if this episode hit, share it with someone still building without a brand. This is the Diamond Hands Podcast. Thanks for listening. Now go lead.